1 Corinthians chapter 15 says that Paul preached the gospel, and that was the first importance, that was the primary thing that he was concerned about. And he sums up the gospel we discovered last week in it was the death and the burial and resurrection of Christ. The interesting thing throughout the rest of that chapter, he does not really try to discuss much about the death of Christ. Did that actually happen, and what happened on the cross? He doesn't really talk a lot about being in the tomb, but he does talk a lot about the resurrection. And so even today, people wonder a little bit, well, what happens when we die? What is this to do with the resurrection? What happens to the people that are saved? What happens, beyond this life? What is going to happen during the resurrection? So people in the world, they have different views on the resurrection. Some people believe there is no resurrection. When you're dead, your body is no more, your life is no more, your spirit, your soul, nothing else continues to live and never will. Some people believe that at the resurrection, perhaps you will come back, even a second time or a third time, called reincarnation. So if you didn't do so well the last life you lived, or in the present life you're living now, you do have some time to maybe correct a few things, and maybe in the next life you can come back in a little better state, a better position, to move yourself along and eventually get to this place, nirvana. This place where, it's all bliss. And other people believe that during the resurrection that maybe that you will be elevated and maybe one day you'll even become as God or a God, and maybe one day you'll even reign in worlds of your own. And there's a group even in our country that believes that. And so there's different views of what happens in the resurrection. So Paul spends 1 Corinthians chapter 15 talking about the resurrection and what's going to happen. And the fact is, we don't have all the answers. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. We know in 1 John, and of course John was one of the apostles. He lived a long time, outlived all the rest of the apostles. He's the one who wrote the book of Revelation. But in 1 John chapter 3, he says, now we are children of God, and what we will be has yet to be made known. So he's saying, I don't even have all the answers myself as far as what's going to happen, when we die and what's going to happen in the next life. Now, God does give us some information. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. What we may call the limited information that God, he's not giving us all the details. And so we're just going to try to look at some scriptures that may help us to answer this question about now, back in the day when you said, I've got a grave question, it was something that's very serious or something that's very solemn. So we're not being serious or solemn tonight, but we are talking about what's going to happen even beyond the grave. What happens when people die? And certainly, I was thinking about that this week and finding out about Joe Maxwell, of his body going into a grave and his spirit returning back to God. And I thought, well, this is a good time as any to look at this question. There have been people that have asked the question. We did a questionnaire a few months ago, and we're still kind of working on some of that. But I'm also kind of incorporating some of the ideas and the suggestions that people had. So the big challenge is it was an anonymous questionnaire. So there may be a chance that the person who really wanted to hear questions about the resurrection and heaven, they're Sunday morning only Christians. So there you go. I don't know how to, work all that out. But anyway, so here we are trying to address some of those questions. And so if you have ever had the question, you just may go away more confused than you did when you came. I don't know how this is all going to work out. So we'll just look at some of the scriptures and we'll take it from there. Because if you ever studied this before, you find that some scriptures seem to be leaning this way, and then there's another verse that seems to kind of look at it a little bit differently. And so we don't, again, have all the answers. But even in the Old Testament, though, some people think, well, in the Old Testament, the only promise that was given is that God would be with the people in this life, that they would be victorious over their enemies, that they would have an abundance of produce, they may have peace in the land, they may have a good life here in the world, and God would continue to be with them. But in fact, the Old Testament does talk about living beyond this life. And Hebrews even reminds us through chapter 11 that even some of the people, although it doesn't mention people like Abraham and Moses, that they are looking forward to another land they're looking forward to a heavenly country and that kind of thing. But Hebrews says, no, they were looking forward to something eternal. They were not just, Abraham was not just saying, I want a promised land, and Moses was not just saying, I'm leading the people to a promised land. They are looking for something beyond. So, put that in the light of Scripture, we realize that, Moses was not a failure. Moses did not go into the promised land. How terrible is that? No, he just went to heaven. It's like, well, that's a lot better than going to the promised land. Again, if you continue reading through Joshua, going to the promised land was good. It just wasn't that good. I mean, it certainly was not as good as heaven. So, in other words, we even want God to be with us, to strengthen us, to guide us, and maybe even to bless us in this life. And I don't know if you've thought of it that way, but when you die as a Christian, like, that's the best thing that could ever happen to you. Does that make sense? I mean, sometimes we're like, no, that'd be terrible if I died. I'd miss you. Actually, I'm really thinking, maybe you'll miss me? I don't know, would you? Anyway, so, but I'll miss being here, or I'll miss seeing my grandchild's wedding, or, there's a lot of things. I'm going to miss that vacation that I'm planning for, next year, whatever. Yeah, there's going to be some things you're going to miss, but you're not going to go to heaven saying, this is a really nice place, but I'm still thinking about that vacation in the Bahamas. I missed it, right? It's not going to happen. It's just like heaven's going to be overwhelmingly wonderful, beautiful, awesome. So, but kind of what is this transition point? What is this between point A and point B, and even a little picture of what it's going to be like. So today, we're not talking about heaven. We're talking about the transition of getting to heaven. So here's Isaiah 26. Here it says, but your dead will live. The dead will live. Yes, the dead are going to live again. They're going to be resurrected. Their bodies will rise. Let those who dwell in the dust wake up and shout for joy. Your dew is like the dew of the morning. The earth will give birth to her dead. So even back then, it's not saying the grave. It's not the end. Death is not the final say. There's something beyond this. We are going to be resurrected, and we're going to be drawn into the kingdom of God in heaven. Daniel chapter 12. At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people. So Michael is the archangel. Daniel is having a spiritual battle going on. He's praying. And so God is sending Michael, dispatching him to come to Daniel's aid. The great prince who protects your people will arise, and there will be a time of distress, such as not has happened from the beginning of the nations until then. So he's talking about something's going to be happening that's going to be catastrophic. It's going to be very, very eventful, and so it's going to be. And this is actually when Daniel is in Babylonian captivity, and that was pretty bad as it is. Sounds like there's something even worse happening. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. Now, this is kind of where we're going to the next part. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. So again, there's a picture of what's going to happen in the Old Testament, a picture of what's going to happen when we die. And so even back then they had this hope of looking forward to something even better. Now Jesus spends quite a bit of time talking about the judgment, talking about what's going to happen, and especially in John, those are the verses where Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. That's where he literally raised his friend from the dead. And so, all the workings of Mary and Martha and Lazarus and just all of that, how that all worked out. And so Jesus is the one who is literally going to be overseeing and ruling over even this judgment. Very truly I say, whoever hears my word and believes in him who sent me has eternal life and will not be judged, but is crossed over from death to life. So again, we think about crossing from life to death, but he's saying there's going to be a crossing from death to life. Very truly, I say a time is coming and has now come when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. So again, the picture that was read in 1 Thessalonians that Joey had read, 1 Thessalonians 4, that there's going to be a trumpet call, that Christ is going to descend from heaven with the angels, and that those who are dead in Christ will rise first. And there's going to be people that are still living in the world that are faithful Christians, and they're going to be joined with these people, and they're going to be united and going to heaven to be with Christ forever. So they're going to hear the voice of the Son. He's going to call them forth from the dead, and there they will live. So there's a few other verses as we put it together and think about how this procedure, the process. Psalm 17. Psalm 17. As for me, I will be vindicated and will see your face. When I awake, I will be satisfied with seeing your likeness. So he recognizes not only a resurrection, but what it's going to be. That I'm going to be meeting God. I'm going to be seeing God as he is. Interesting thing in the Old Testament, what does it say? That no one can see God and live. No one can see God and live. Now, sometimes people saw a glimpse of God or a piece of God. Moses, you remember when he was in the cleft of the rock, and when God passed by, God says that, you can see basically my back as I'm leaving. You can see basically the tail part of my glory. You remember Isaiah in chapter 6, that he had a vision and he was in heaven. Now, he didn't actually see the Lord face to face. What he saw was the glory of God. He saw the robe of the Lord that was filling the temple. So he saw a lot of the glory of God, but did not meet God face to face. But the thing is, they saw a glimpse of the glory and the power and the awesomeness of God. But to see God face to face, you will not live. So what happens is when we die and we go to heaven and we've been redeemed, all the sins have been washed away, and we are in a complete, pure, and holy state because of Christ, that then we can meet God face to face. We can be in his presence and not be consumed, because we will have even the glory of Christ in ourselves because of what he has done for us. So we will be satisfied just seeing the likeness. We'll be seeing God. We'll be meeting him, seeing him face to face. So this is what we look forward to in our lives as Christians, of what heaven would be like. So John chapter 5 and 28 and 29, Jesus said, do not be amazed at this, for time is coming when all who are in their graves will hear his voice and come out. Those who have done what is good will rise to live, and those who have done what is evil will rise to be condemned. So again, another clear picture of the resurrection. So again, the picture that those who are righteous, not necessarily because of your righteous deeds, but because of Christ's righteous deeds, and you've trusted him, you've followed him, you've tried to be faithful to Christ, you will rise from the dead to go to heaven to be with God forever. But the people that have rejected Christ and continue to walk in darkness and to continue in their persistence of sin, that they will also be resurrected. They're going to live, but they're going to go to a place of condemnation. So again, this is the picture that Jesus has. This is what he tells us of what it's going to be like in this resurrection. So again, 1 Corinthians covers a lot of the details, and so we're not going to go through all the details of 1 Corinthians. You can maybe read that on your own and try to piece some of the things together. But in verse 51 of 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says, I tell you a mystery. I tell you a mystery. Quite often in the New Testament, when Paul talked about a mystery, so he does this several times. He does it as well in Ephesians chapter 3 of this mystery. A mystery is something that the people had not really understood before. So people in the Old Testament didn't understand some of these concepts. So Ephesians 3 would be talking about the kingdom or the church that God had established through Christ. This is talking about the resurrection. So it's a mystery. It's not mystical. It's just people had never known it before. They may have talked about it and tried to figure it out, but it was unavailable to them. So this mystery, this thing people have been trying to understand, has now been revealed. So that's what he's saying. This mystery is going to be made plain. But what he says is, we will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. Right? So I don't know if you've heard of that before. I think that is the favorite sign for the nursery. Okay, so moving right along. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In the flash of an eye, the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. So again, this is kind of connecting up with what it said in 1 Thessalonians when Christ returns. For the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. Okay, so we are going to be different. And so always the big question is, how are we going to be different? And ultimately I would say, I don't know. It's very hard to understand how we're going to be different. We're going to be similar to what we are. We're not going to be completely different, but we are going to be different. So he goes on in 1 Corinthians 15 saying, flesh and blood will not inherit the kingdom of God. So we will not be flesh and blood, but we will be something. We will show up in a spirit form. Okay? So quite often in the New Testament, what it says is that when we are raised, we are going to be raised like who? Remember who we're going to be raised like? Well, the only person I know that was ever raised in this way is Jesus. We're going to be raised like Jesus. Interesting. Well, how was Jesus raised? Well, he was raised from the dead. He was not flesh and blood, although he could eat, but he could also show up in buildings without coming through the door. He can just come right through the wall. So he can go from one place to the other, kind of mysteriously, right? So he can do things that we cannot do. So it's not flesh and blood. But he appeared as flesh and blood. People didn't look at him and say, no, he doesn't look like Jesus at all. Right? They say, this is Jesus. We can tell. Sometimes Jesus had the ability to cover up his appearance. So walking on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize it was Jesus. I don't know why. It doesn't say why. Maybe they never really gave him a good look, or maybe they had tears in their eyes. But probably it's because Jesus was veiled in some way. There's something about him that he didn't look like Jesus. But usually the rest of the time when they saw him, it was like, well, no, that's somebody. That's not Jesus. No, they recognized. So he appeared as what? Jesus, like what he was when he was alive. He looked very similar to that, but he was not that. Does that make sense? He was not flesh and blood. When he ascended back into heaven, what ascended back to heaven? It was his body. He was there talking to them, and as he was talking, this is Acts chapter 1, he ascended. They watched him go up to heaven, and it was his body. What happened? I don't, between kind of earth and heaven? I don't know. Did he kind of get all the way up to heaven with his body? Or at some point did he shed that body where, does that make sense? It wasn't his physical body, but when Jesus rose from the dead, you got to be clear on this too, that they didn't go to the tomb and say, oh yeah, the dead body, the corpse is here, but he's risen spiritually. No, he didn't rise. He rose physically. And when he rose physically, like he wasn't like a caterpillar and he shed off the cocoon, right? The old body, he kept that old, now it was transformed. It was different, but it was his body. Does that make sense? Now, if we're going to be raised like Christ, how are we going to be raised? Well, you can figure that out on your own, I guess, because I don't want to put any ideas in your head. Too late. I've already done it. I know. But, we've got to work that out on our own. What does that mean? But this is what he's saying. We'll be raised from the dead, we'll be imperishable, and we'll be changed. But there may be something like us, something similar. So the big challenge I have with this idea is, what if near the end of my life I'm handicapped, where I'm just old, got a lot of aches and pains, and I don't look very good. Is that the way I got to live for the rest of eternity? Amen. Or like the little baby, right? We have a little baby. Oh, sorry, the little baby never grew up. Baby in heaven. So I guess at some point we are going to be, the essence of the best part of our life. So we're all going to be like mid-30s in heaven. We are going to be handsome and pretty, buff and cute. Yeah, I don't know what that means, right? But does that make sense? Everybody follow me with that? So if we're going to be there with our physical bodies, what body is it? So I don't have the answer to that one. That's why these are grave questions. We just don't have all the answer. I think it's what John is saying. We don't have it all figured out. But maybe there's a few verses that may continue to help us. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, Paul is saying something similar. We know that if this earthly tent we live in is destroyed, so we're going to die, and the body is going to decay. So again, whether you're in the grave or whether you're cremated, either way, your body eventually is going to decay. I mean, there's people that have been dead for 5,000, like Adam and Eve, right? Their bodies are not in a crypt somewhere where, it's being, protected. And they look as good today as they did the day they died. Right? I mean, their bones probably have also deteriorated. So God is pretty powerful. So if he wants to reconstitute everyone back to what they looked like when they were in the world. But if this tent that we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God. So again, he's not saying we're going to be a building, but we are going to have some kind of a physical as well as spiritual aspect to ourselves. We'll have a building from God, an eternal house in the heaven, not built by human hands. Meanwhile, we groan, longing to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, because when we are clothed, we will not be found naked. So this is what he's saying. My spirit wants to be in that place where I'm comfortable, right? Where I fit, where, the clothing that I have, the surrounding of my body kind of fits with my spirit and with my soul. So this is what he's looking forward to, because this body just does not do it justice of what God really wants to do in me and through me. But when I have a heavenly being, a heavenly body, then things will be much different. Philippians chapter 3 in verse 20. Now, a lot of times we, at least I do anyway, focus on our citizenships in heaven. What does that mean, being a citizen, and the rights of citizenship, the responsibilities of citizenship. We eagerly await the Savior from there. That's all good. But look what he says, that the Lord Jesus Christ, who by the power that enables him to bring everything under his control, what will he do? He will transform our lowly bodies. So he doesn't say we're going to get rid of the lowly bodies altogether, that we're just going to wipe them out, and we are going to make something completely new. You're going to get a better model of you. It's kind of like an automobile, right? Some people have an old automobile. Some people like trading up to a newer. But guess what? They're all automobiles, right? So he's going to create something much better, but it's also going to perhaps be similar to what we already have. So again, Jesus rose from the dead. But you remember the Mount of Transfiguration. Now, who showed up Mount of Transfiguration? Moses and Elijah. How did they show up? Obviously, they showed up spiritually, right? I mean, they had been dead for 1,500 years or 1,000 years, depending on which one you're looking at. They've been dead a long time. That's weird. How did they show up? I mean, even if God brought them physically out of the grave, again, all their body parts would have been already decayed. So how did they show up? They showed up in a spiritual form. What did they look like? I'm thinking they must have looked a little bit like, I don't know, I wasn't there. But since it was Moses and Elijah, I'm thinking they looked a little bit like Moses and Elijah. Not to the point that people could really figure that out. I don't know how the apostles knew who they were, except Jesus maybe introduced them, because they had never met them before either, unless they had the pictures in the Bible. But even our pictures in the Bible are not even the real pictures of what Moses and Elijah looked like. You can say, I got the picture of my Bible, and you meet him and go, nah, you're not him. Bible, No. How do they know? I don't know. But it was a Moses and Elijah that showed up in some kind of a form. It doesn't say they were angels. Angels are much different. So they showed up as Moses and Elijah. But they had a spiritual body too. It was not physical. They didn't say, boy, I'm tired, I need to sleep, or no. It was spiritual, but there was something about them that was identifiable to who they were. But we are going to be transformed like Christ's glory. What do we know about Christ's glorious body? Jesus' body looked like Jesus. So my spiritual body is going to be glorified. It's going to be changed. It's going to be much different as far as its makeup, but it may look similar to something maybe I was, something I had, something I am, something familiar. Okay? And I don't know if ultimately that matters. I'm not sure if we're going to know each other in heaven anyway, right? I mean, because that would be kind of weird, because we'd go to heaven and, like, I don't know, we'd live on, like, the Royal Oak Street, because we hang out with the people we know. So this is 1 John 3 and verse 2. I mentioned that at the beginning. Here John says, dear friends, now we are children of God. That's one thing I know. We are children of God. We've been born again. We belong to Him. He loves us, and by His grace we're saved. Through Jesus Christ, we are children of God. And what we will be, what's in the future, what we are going to become, has not yet been made known. But we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like Him, for we shall see Him as He is. So we're going to see Him just like He is. And so this is a part of the promise of God, that we don't have it all figured out. And maybe God has given us as much information as we could handle, as much as we could understand. If He got into a lot more detail, we'd really be scratching our head and we'd say, that doesn't make any sense at all. How could that ever be? And God says, I can take care of it. I'm just going to give you enough information. I want to give you enough information that you know for sure that you want to go there. Right? So again, all the details of heaven are not spelled out. Heaven is a very spiritual place, and so it's sometimes hard to explain spiritual things to people that are in the flesh. Just like it's hard for us sometimes to explain the spiritual truths of God's Word that we know, and we've come to understand, and we've come to believe. You know, we spent time at it, and through faith and through trust and through reliance on God's Word, we've come to understand that. But when you try to explain it to somebody that really has no interest in the Bible, right? They're like, that doesn't make any sense. That just sounds silly. Why would you believe? I don't understand. Now, they may understand if they keep searching and seeking, and they're diligent and they're open, and God leads. You know, there's a lot of things involved. They can understand, but initially it's just like they don't get it. But you say, boy, I understand that. And sometimes we think, well, it's not that hard to understand. Why aren't they understanding? Because they don't have the capacity to understand spiritual truth unless they're spiritual people. And so God has given us information we can understand, but if it was much more, it would be beyond our ability to grasp even what He's talking about, and it just adds to confusion. So again, sometimes there is a little bit of confusion about how it's all going to work out, but I know it's going to work out good. I know you're not going to want to miss it. I know when it's happening, you're not going to be disappointed. You know, you're not going to be like, well, thought I was going to get a better body than this. Right? No, you're going to be happy. You're going to be content. You're going to find joy in what God has done for us and to us and through us, you know, especially in the resurrection. So it's something we look forward to. It's something that we celebrate in. And it's something that we take comfort in, even for those people that have already gone on before, to realize that God has something wonderful. 1 Corinthians chapter 2 says, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, not even the mind or the heart is able to conceive what God has prepared for those who love Him. And so I know it's going to be a lot better than anything you can ever dream of, think of, make up in your mind. And so God has that plan for us. And so we have great hope, and that's exciting news that we can take and have peace and to be able to comfort each other, and also to be able to share with people that don't know Christ that there is something much better than what's in this world. So if we can encourage you today, if today you want the prayers of the church, if today you want to surrender your life to Christ, to say, that's the kind of hope I want. If I die, I want to be ready. I want to go to heaven. I want to be resurrected. I want to live with God forever in heaven. If that's what you'd like, and if we can encourage you, and if today you want to walk on the heavens road, lay down our heavy load, we can do that today. So if you want to be baptized into Christ, we can also do that if today you're ready to make that decision. Let's stand, we'll sing, and let us know how we can encourage you.